Namaste. I'll be presenting on behalf of the team. So my presentation is mainly on health policy system research institutions. We had a project, it was FAB HPSRIs. So, the project mainly entailed developing a framework. In this presentation, I'm mainly going to talk about the framework, what was the lessons learned, and what are the future directions for health policy system research. My presentation is going to include the landscape, the context for health policy system research in Nepal. We're going to talk about the process of the creation of the capacity assessment framework. And we're going to talk about the framework itself, what the framework holds, what's its values and everything. And we're also going to talk about the lessons learned and future directions with health policy system research, or HPSR in short. So as you can see, the figure presents the landscape of health policy system research in Nepal. The figure shows who the major actors in health policy system research are. As we can see in the figure, so in one side of the spectrum are health policy system research institutions, and those includes individual research institutions and researchers. That includes NGOs, INGOs, and other private research institutions. And it also includes academic institutions. And other than that, it includes individual researchers and scholars. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have policy-making bodies. It includes bodies from the federal, provincial, and local level. And on the middle, we have funding agencies. So this figure, it mainly shows how the different actors interact and how do they work together, how do they support each other. So I'm not gonna really go much into the detail, but as you can see, this is the general operating framework for health policy system research in context of Nepal. Speaking of the context and issues that we're having with health HPSR is that now the importance of HPSR is slowly starting, people have started to realize, but it has to be noted that it's pretty patchy and the progress is pretty slow. And there's also limited culture of impact assessment of health system strengthening interventions, and that hinders the evaluation of health system effectiveness. Okay, we can also see there is gap in terms of evidence gap in terms of making high impact and low cost interventions. And it's evident that there is limited research capacity, and that acts as barriers towards effectively tackling health challenges and emerging health issues. And all of this points to a need for capacity assessment of different health policy system research institutions, and it pointed towards the need of having a robust framework to measure to assess the capacity and to measure the competence of different institutions. The main objective was to identify what are the attributes for a robust health policy system research institution. So what is needed for an institution to be robust? So that was our first motive. And the second one was to co-create a capacity assessment framework to assess the research capacity for health policy system research institutions. And the important thing here is co-creation. So what we did throughout the project, we were involved in a series of different steps. What we did was we conducted a preliminary literature review just to identify what are the qualities, what qualities should institutions working on health policy system research possess. And so we did the literature review, we came up with designated domains for capacity assessment, then we further refined the domains through 20 key informant interviews that involved different people's representatives from HPSRIs, academic institutions, policy level, representatives from the policy level. So we had an interview of 20 different experts, and that further guided us to the next step. So that was the joint workshop. Then we had a series of workshops, each shaping the next workshop. And at the end of the workshop, the aim of the workshop was to, as mentioned before, was to co-create a capacity assessment framework. And so every step, every workshop shaped our framework in a different way. So I'm just going to run very briefly through what are the current issues that HPSRIs are having to deal with. At the system level, there are evidence gaps, and they're not clearly identified. Institutionalization of learnings is yet to be fully shaped, and there is very limited collaboration, particularly within academic institutions and policy. And there's very weak linkages between academic institutions and the policy level. And also there's very limited resources for HPSR. And there is a lack of technical capacity in many spectrums. And at the organizational level, there's various, the understanding of HPSRIs is different among different stakeholders. There's limited institutional home for learning, and there's lack of incentive for continuous engagement. And there's also weak coordination between different agencies, leading to duplication of work. I mentioned this before, there's very limited linkage and network and connection to the wider system. And at the individual level, again, we are talking about capacity. Professionals they have different understanding. There's limited opportunities for HPSR grants. And there's very weak evaluation of HPSR, and there's lack of interest due to lack of continuation. So this is the framework. Our framework is, it mainly has 4 domains. Some are more heavily loaded, like for instance, technical competency is more heavily loaded. It has more subdomains. But these are the 4 core areas in which we measure the capacity of an organization. So one is their ability to manage. The other one is their ability to inform policy. The other is their technical competency. And the other one is their ability to collaborate and co-create, and also their ability to be involved in the network. So in terms of measuring capacity, so we use the 2-prong approach. So what we are looking at is, for the current practices, we will be looking at what HPSRIs are doing and what is supposed to be done. So, and that's one way we measure capacity. And also we're gonna check for discrepancies between what is available and what is needed. And capacity we're gonna measure in terms of basic, medium, and advanced. What's the future use of the tool? So number one, we believe it can be used by HPSRIs for periodic self-assessments. They can check in specific periods of time to see whether they have progressed, or the capacity is the same, or they have gone downhill, or whatever the case is. So that can be used as a tool for periodic assessment. It can also be used as a tool for periodic assessment of capacity by NHRC. It can be used as a preliminary step for planning capacity development initiatives, and it can be used as a tool for categorization of research institutions based on the capacity. There are some limitations with the tool. The first one is computing a composite score and comparing organizations based on the score could be very challenging because of the diverse nature of work. And also, not all questions in the tool are applicable to all organizations, and hence that affects the total points on which the capacity is scored, and it can be different, it can be misleading sometimes. And also, the nature of organizations evolve over time, and some questions that are not relevant at this point of time might be important later. So, future actions. So now that we have the tool, what we can do is we can institutionalize the tool. We can, so that means we can pilot the tool in larger institutions and facilitating the use on a regular basis. We can develop a video tutorial for the tool, basically guiding the users to aid their application of the tool. We can also make multiple versions of the tool for different, considering the nature of the organization. It can be used for knowledge dissemination, wider dissemination of findings. We can have paper publications, conference presentations, and several policy dialogues. And we can establish a network of HPSRIs, and we can also aim for capacity development at all 3 levels, individual, organizational, and system level. So I'm going to wrap up really quick. So the key takeaway messages here is HPSR itself it's very tough to define, and it's defined more by the issue it addresses. And it's very tough to have a clear differentiation from other types of research. There's a diversity in the interest of actors by the area of work, by the nature of funding, and the functions. So by area of work, some are working in policy analysis, some are involved with program evaluation in terms of funding, some are funded by the government, some have external sources of funding. In terms of functions, some are academic institutions, some are research organizations, some are policy-making bodies, and also program implementing agencies. The other messages are So HPSR is a multidisciplinary field, and it combines methods from multiple disciplines, and it's very difficult to have exhaustive list of methodological skills required. And there are vast contextual differences in terms of organization and structure from one setting to other, and it needs highly contextualized and tailored research methodologies. And also addressing all these complexities in a single tool can be very challenging. It's very complex, and workshop participants suggested that we have multiple versions of the tool. So one lessons, something we need to learn is that it's very important to differentiate between individual and institutional capacity. They can be confusing at times, and it's also important to balance trade-off between comprehensiveness and length of questions. And it's also, people have different understanding on what constitutes HPSR's research capacity, and organizations tend to look for their own agenda in the capacity assessment tool. Thank you.